Hello, my name's Adele Duffield from North Yorkshire County Council Libraries. I'm lucky enough to be able to interview Mike Shaw today, who many of you will know as the face of the Sutcliffe Gallery in Whitby. He's agreed to talk to me as part of the Fish and Ships Festival in Whitby, which celebrates everything Whitby offers in terms of fish and the fishing industry, and of course ships. And we can boast the spectacular historic connection to shipbuilding, world navigation, with names such as William Scoresby and James Cook, to name but two. However, it's the work of Frank Meadow Sutcliffe, the renowned photographer of the Victorian era, who lived and worked around Whitby and the surrounding area, that this interview is going to concentrate on today.
And here we have some photographs from the great man Frank Meadow Sutcliffe. Here he is in profile, and this is a selection of his medals that he won during his career as a photographer. This next shot is girls scanning mussels, which you can see the girls chit-chatting outside as they're working. And the next one here, this is the fish market. And actually in the crowd here, Mike Shaw's great-great-grandfather is in this shot, which I think is absolutely wonderful. The next one is fetching the lines, which shows how the women of the day were as heavily engaged in the fishing industry as the men were, albeit not out at sea. And then the fish stall is showing all of the trade being sold on the quayside.
So, welcome, Mike. It's good to have you here.
Hi, Adele. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So, what I wanted to ask you is the family of Frank Meadow Sutcliffe obviously have lived here quite a long time ago to now, but what I was wondering is that since he sold his business in the 1920s to a Mr. Gillett, how did your family come to obtain the business and to be where you are today?
In a very lucky position, basically, of handling Sutcliffe's work. My father was a professional photographer, and this was in the 50s, 1950s. And because he was a local chap from some sites, and because he was a professional photographer, he was asked by the person then who was actually publishing Sutcliffe's work. He was called Hugh Lambert Smith, who took over from Mr. Gillett. This was in 1959. My father was asked if he would be interested in taking over the publishing and curating of Frank Sutcliffe's archive, his collection of glass plates.
Right.
So in 1959, which happens to have been the year I was born, so it was a bit of a double whammy for my dad.
Yes.
In that, I'm sure it's probably more important to him that that he'd been offered this fantastic, offered to buy it as a business.
Yes.
It wasn't just that we'd like to have this given. He bought it as a going concern,
Right.
along with all of Sutcliffe's medals that he won for his photography, and along with one of Sutcliffe's anyway, original cameras, which is here by my side.
And that is a wonderful specimen, I have to say.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So that's basically in 1959. My father took over the Sutcliffe collection. The business at that point was called FM Sutcliffe.
Right.
At that point, and in the mid-60s, I think it was, my father changed the name to the Sutcliffe Gallery.
Right. That's interesting. Yes. Yeah. So, the Sutcliffe Gallery then obviously didn't exist as we know it, or have known it, in his own lifetime.
No, it was Mr. Gillett brought Sutcliffe's collection down from Skinner Street down to where we have been at number 1 Flowergate.
Right.
In 1920, and called the business FM Sutcliffe.
Right. Okay.
And that's how. So from around about that period, where number 1 Flowergate was shown Sutcliffe's work, up until very recently.
Okay, so he actually didn't have a shop himself or a gallery as such. Did he just do private commissions then at that time?
He did have his own studio. It was because
Right.
his main business, his main form of his bread and butter
Mhm.
was as a portrait photographer,
I see.
and he needed basically to have a studio. His first one was in Waterloo Yard,
Oh
at the
yes.
top of Flowergate,
Yeah.
and then he had a couple of premises on Skinner Street. Latterly, when he was most famous, he was at number 25,
Right.
which is now a health food shop. But in recent years, it was actually called Meadow,
Oh yes.
and the lady who ran Meadow Ladies' Clothes Shop not pinched, but used Frank Meadow Sutcliffe's middle name because that's where he had his studio.
Do you know, I didn't know that.
And there's a blue plaque now, and there's been
Right.
a Civic Society blue plaque on that premises, and I think it went up in the 90s, I think.
Wow. Right. That's really interesting. I didn't know. I wondered where she got that name
Yeah,
Meadow from,
yeah.
but yeah, that is interesting. So yeah, super. So was it Frank Meadow Sutcliffe then who inspired your love of photography, like, or and if so, at what age, or was it from your father? Where did that interest come from?
Well, I think that the major influence, I guess, would have been brought up with Sutcliffe's work from being a baby, in effect.
Right.
Obviously not my formative years as
No.
that, but I was involved in the Sutcliffe Gallery from the age of, say, I don't know, 10, working weekends, maybe just earning a little bit of pocket money,
Yeah.
mounting prints and such like, and subconsciously absorbing what his artistry was about. I think what nice composition was, what good composition was, should I say, and the quality of his work. I was just looking at it all the time, really. I suppose.
Yes.
I mean, my dad was a fantastic photographer. But his line of work was more portrait work.
Right.
Which,
just like Frank Sutcliffe himself.
Yes,
Yes.
that's right. It's certainly not anything that I'm leaning towards as portrait photography. I have no skills dealing with people whatsoever. Really. So my interest, I think, is in landscape photography.
Yes, which obviously you've done an awful lot of photography of that, and there's a lot of evidence of that around, isn't there? Which is great. So what about his photos of ships and the local fishing industry? What is it about that, do you think, that remains so atmospheric and popular today?
I mean, Frank Sutcliffe's photographs, I think, are timeless. All of them are, especially the ones that I suppose really do depict an era that's gone now with the sails, the period of sailing boats.
Yes.
And the coming of the steamboats. He documented all those, but in a very artistic manner. He wasn't just documenting the harbour scenes. He was making beautiful pictures from them as well, which was another aspect to what any normal photographer would have done, maybe.
Yes.
That's what set him apart, I think.
Yes, yeah, it is interesting. I mean, you can obviously see that because obviously he's got lots of photographs of children and characters and the people in the industry. But it's that backdrop that is it captures the atmosphere, doesn't it?
Yes.
It absolutely
Talking
does.
of atmosphere, that's one of the things that he loved. I think the atmosphere that sometimes or often created when he had the time to take these photographs. When I say that, his time was all used up during the summer by the tourists taking their portraits. He was very busy man, and he tended to have this free time to go out and do what he really wanted to do in the winter. Not necessarily when it was snowing, but there are some beautiful snow scenes that he took. But what I think he loved was the atmospheric conditions of the mist, and mixed with a bit of the smoke from all the open fires that were prevalent then, not so much nowadays, of course. So that sort of smog and sunshine combined, it created something that he had been brought up with, that type of art, for want of a better word. He was brought up with. His father built what was called a diorama, which was like when they were children, when Frank Sutcliffe and his brothers and sisters were children.
Right.
Frank Sutcliffe's father, who was a professional artist,
Okay.
very inventive, he built this diorama for them to play with, which was like a stage, a miniature stage, with figures in, but also various planes of tissue paper to create this atmosphere in a picture.
Right.
And this is, this is from Sutcliffe's own writings that he remembers this
Yes.
diorama.
So he was obviously absorbing that at
Exactly.
the same time, just like
I know,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
right.
yeah. No, that's really fascinating. It is. So, so was Frank Meadow Sutcliffe actually famous in his own lifetime then?
It's a funny one to answer, but yes, he was very famous as a photographer of the photographs that he's known for nowadays. He wasn't famous for his portrait work because, being a portrait photographer in Victorian times, there was a standard setup that he followed.
Yes.
That was the accepted norm that he felt he probably had to stick to. But he became famous with his, I suppose you call it his hobby.
Yes.
He became very famous.
Yes.
Like down in London, he exhibited in London a lot. Just as an example of the standing that he held in his day within photography. In 1888, there was what's called the London Camera Club, which they'd just been formed really in 1888, and they had this idea of having the first one-man exhibition. This is in London.
Okay. Yeah.
So they had the choice of any photographer in this country to choose from, and this first one-man exhibition was Frank Sutcliffe that it shows,
Right.
exhibiting about 300 of his photographs. And this is in London. It wasn't just little old Whitby.
No. So he really made
a lot of people maybe don't realise the standing that he held certainly within the photographic world for his skills, both technically and artistically. But anyway, going back to your point, he became famous for this artistic photography, but that had a knock-on effect, certainly within the local area of Leeds, Newcastle area, for people to flock to Whitby to have their photograph taken by Frank Meadow Sutcliffe, this famous photographer.
Yeah.
So it would have been had a lot of cachet. Would have been photographed by Frank Sutcliffe. Having your portrait taken in Victorian times showed a certain amount of cachet anyway, because it was an expensive thing to do. Only the rich generally could afford to have a portrait of themselves, but to have one taken by this very famous photographer.
Absolutely, yes.
I'm guessing he maybe charged a bit of a premium, you don't know, but whatever. He was very, very successful in his day, yeah.
That is amazing. So I'm really pleased that he was, because so many people from centuries ago were never famous in their own lifetimes, and have only become famous, posthumously.
Exactly.
So well done him. And how do you feel then to be associated with such an icon of photography? I mean, from this area, do you feel like you're the modern day equivalent of Frank Meadow Sutcliffe?
No.
You're more of a conduit of keeping his memory alive.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, both my father and myself, my father's sadly no longer with us, but both I know himself and myself have felt, I suppose, very fortunate to have been in the position of promoting Sutcliffe's work and maintaining the standard of his work. It was one of the things my father always drummed into me, was that the quality of his work must be preserved.
Yes.
Because he Frank Sutcliffe made that quality. He was a perfectionist, obviously, and for somebody else to sort of denigrate that work and reduce the quality of what was shown wouldn't have been fair to Sutcliffe's memory at all.
No. Well, you've certainly done a good job there.
Well, we tried.
But I mean, looking at that piece of equipment behind you, it's hard to believe how, when you compare it to the modern day equipment that we have, cameras that we have, how the difference works and how we could possibly achieve such quality.
This is an example of the glass plates that Sutcliffe took.
Right.
It isn't an original, I hasten to add.
No.
But it is a replica. This is the size of the negatives.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can.
The famous Abbey one with the cows drinking.
That way round, actually. Yes, that's the right way round. Yeah. And I've worked out that compared to pretty much the best digital SLRs, which are say 36 megapixel, this equates to, in megapixel terms, 1,500 megapixels.
Wow.
So the quality that these can show, that can be printed from these.
Yeah.
I mean, we've printed them at about 6 foot by 4 foot from these negatives, and there's no loss in quality whatsoever. this is 140 years ago.
Yeah.
That, okay, yes, it was very difficult to actually take photographs with these cameras. They're very specialised.
Yeah.
What, I suppose in a way, even though the quality maybe isn't quite as good nowadays, but photography is being opened up to the masses,
Yeah.
that anybody can appreciate taking photographs for themselves, which I found over recent years since digital photography's come along, and when we had the gallery in Bottom Flowergate, people appreciated Sutcliffe's work more almost because they take their own photographs. They also appreciate that it's not as easy as it looks to create something special.
Yes. You can take thousands of snaps, but to get
I'm
a
the same
really good one.
on my phone.
Yeah.
You're deleting most of it, but sorry. Yes,
Well, exactly, you do. But no, that is fascinating, and it does go to prove, doesn't it, that he was absolutely, as you said, a perfectionist, but a master of his time, definitely. He is quoted as saying how change in the industrial landscape was spoiling the fishing industry, mainly down to the advent of steam and the Industrial Revolution. But how do you think he would feel today, seeing what's happening to the fishing industry?
Very sad, I guess. Very sad, as we all are, really.
Yes.
But it has been diminishing over the years. It's not just within very recent years. I think probably from the 50s onwards to the present day, it's been diminishing.
Yeah.
It's one of those situations, I guess, where he's been like a double-edged sword for Frank Sutcliffe. That he loved the atmosphere that the steam created for his photography, but he saw the coming of trains, the coming of steamships, tourism even was just kicking off in his day, partly to do with the trains, bringing people to easy access to the town. I think a little bit like some people are nowadays in Whitby, that they feel it's maybe a bit too busy, but in Victorian times it would have been busy. It would have been almost second to Scarborough as being one of the most popular tourist resorts in this country. Which is one of again stepping back a few steps. That's one of the reasons why he was such a successful photographer.
Absolutely, yeah. It sort of goes with the territory. I mean, Queen Victoria herself loved the area, and that was, and she was an advocate for making Whitby Jet famous, wasn't it? Because she loved it in her jewellery.
Right.
So,
Scarborough, just stopping you a second, Scarborough in Sutcliffe's time, there was an Italian photographer in Scarborough, very successful, and in their money, not our money now, in their money at the time, his yearly earnings from his photography, it was about £20,000.
Wow, that's amazing.
There
are some people who'd be happy to earn that now.
So, it just
yeah, that is crazy, isn't it? Well, he obviously was right up there with the best, wasn't he?
Yes.
So thinking of where we are with the Sutcliffe Gallery, obviously a lot of people will be sad to think that the shop is no longer with us, unfortunately, at the bottom of Flowergate. But, people who do still want to follow his work and to see what's happening, how can they access this man's great work now?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously up to a point I feel slightly guilty about taking the gallery away from Whitby. We did try to find a continuation in that respect. It didn't really happen. So we have a lovely website showing about 400 or 500 photographs, all in top quality, that people can access 24 hours a day. We were never able to display that quantity of photographs at any one time in our gallery. So there's upsides and downsides, really, like everything in life, really. But the website is open to the world.
Yes.
For them to see his work.
And can people still buy his prints then? Do you still have that ability to put the prints together into pictures and send them off anywhere in the world?
Order direct from the website.
Right. But so the business has just really moved online from where it was in the gallery. So it's moved from a physical space to a virtual space.
We happened to close the gallery just before the pandemic.
Yes.
Without knowing anything about this coming along. So in some respects, from a personal point of view, I suppose, it was good timing.
So this is one of Frank Meadow Sutcliffe's pictures that Mike's showing us here.
Yes, this is titled Sunshine and Shadow. This is my all-time favourite of Sutcliffe's, I think. It has lots of aspects of his mastery in light, dealing with light, and his technical prowess at maintaining detail in the sails, which would be so easily lost and just be totally silhouetted out. I don't know whether you can actually see in the filming of this, but there is quite a lot of detail in the sails, and it's just it's a photograph that a lot of photographers would maybe just pass by, and I think it's one of his finest, really, as far as his artistry goes.
Great.
Well, I think that wraps up our questions. So, unless there's anything else that you'd like to add, I'd just like to say thank you very much, Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing about the great man, and obviously bringing along your equipment has been superb too, to see that. And if anyone is interested, then obviously do go onto the website and follow the work of Frank Meadow Sutcliffe, which is being kept alive by Mike on the website. So thank you.
Thank you, Adele. Thank you.